Welcome to episode 20 of VR Roundtable. I am one of the hosts, Anthony, and I am, of course, joined by my two partners in crime. I have Gary coming to us live from the United Kingdom. Gary, let's kick it over to you real quick. You know what we haven't done on our show very much is go kind of off the reservation a little bit and talk about something maybe completely out of the realm of virtual reality. And I'm catching Gary completely off guard here because I did not mention this whatsoever before starting this episode. But I just thought it would be kind of cool if maybe we did just a quick little kind of like what's been going on lately type of thing. Gary, have you seen any new movies, or are you watching any new TV shows, or any media that you've consumed recently that's not video game related that has caught your eye?
Not too much, really. I mean, I've been catching up with The Walking Dead. I don't know if anybody watches The Walking Dead, but that's the big thing that I've been watching lately. So I'm really enjoying it. The latest series 7, it's been a little bit different from the previous ones, and I've been really enjoying that. So other than that, not too much really. No, I've just been sort of busy with work and busy sorting out my office and things like that. So I've not been doing too much in terms of like movies or anything like that. Although I am interested to watch Hacksaw Ridge. I don't know if anybody is seen that movie at all. I don't know if it's out there yet or not, or if it's we usually get movies a little bit later over here. So but yeah, other than that, not too much really. No.
Hey, quick question on The Walking Dead. I've seen the entire the most recent season up to where we are. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but I was actually, my whole family was watching The Walking Dead, and I do have kids, but they're teenagers. So they're kind of on the borderline of whether or not they should be watching a show. Well, the older one is fine, but the younger one is kind of borderline as far as if they should be watching a show like that. But we were watching the very first episode of this new season, sitting there with my wife and my two kids, and we're watching this episode, and we knew it was going to be crazy, because of all the previews and stuff and the way the last season ended. You knew something was going to be crazy. And when all that stuff happened, and it was really the second thing that happened, my wife was like, the hell with this. I'm not watching this show anymore. And she walked away, and she still, to this day, has not seen any additional episodes of Walking Dead.
Yeah.
It threw her over the edge. Did you have any weird reactions to that very first episode?
Oh God, that was like one of the most horrific episodes I've seen of anything ever. That was it wasn't just the violence in it, but it's also like the psychological aspect of it as well. Like the guy who's talking to him, I won't spoil anything, but it's just the words he's saying and just the way he's toying with them and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh my God, that was a tough one to get through, I've got to say.
Yeah, I like the new bad guys. Pretty cool. Okay, Steve, what about you? Same question. Any movies, TV shows, anything you've been into recently?
No, nothing new on TV shows. We watch a ton of TV though. I mean, I think TV series are like better than movies now. They've gotten, it used to be, 20 years ago it was the other way around. So we've gone back, and we're on the last season of Sons of Anarchy. So I know that show's been done for a couple of years now. We never watched it, and we had it recommended to us a lot. So we're towards the end of it, and we've liked it a lot, and it does the same thing. Like I think if you've watched Game of Thrones, the end of season 3, the Red Wedding, like that changed TV now. Like, and I think The Walking Dead and the scene that you're talking about, like I think it's borrowed straight out of the Red Wedding. Like it's a totally different scenario and everything, but it's like shock. It has to be there. Like I think it just changed TV.
Yeah,
cool stuff.
Yeah, and I'll just say real quickly for me, just since we're on this tangent, I have been watching this show called Black Mirror. I think you guys have both mentioned it before, and one episode I recently just saw, it might be like actually the last episode that's available right now, is the one where it's like these artificial robot bees that are flying around. And
I've not seen that one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've seen it. I think I've seen about the first 2 episodes of this latest series, but Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Black Mirror because it's like you'll watch one of their episodes, and a lot of them are like 1 hour long or sometimes an hour and 10 minutes. And it's almost like watching a short movie rather than a TV show. And like Steve was saying, I actually find it hard to sit through a 2 hour, 3 hour movie unless it's something I'm like really into, because I've gotten so used to these 45-minute TV shows when you take all the commercials out and it's like 45, 50 minutes and they cover a lot of stuff and it's really cool. And so, anyways, I know this is all non-VR stuff. I just wanted to take it off the reservation a little bit real quick before we get into our news this week. But let's see here. What do we have on our news stories? Okay, so basically the big story this week is, again, the Zenimax Oculus lawsuit situation that's happening. And we're actually recording this on Sunday, January 29th. And tomorrow, there could potentially be a decision in this case, Oculus versus Zenimax. I'll go ahead and kick it over to Gary. Gary, when it comes to this decision, do you feel like we'll have a decision tomorrow, or maybe it could take a couple of days? And what do you think's going to happen with this, man? What do you think the shakeout is going to be?
Well, I think it's surprising that we looking this early to get a decision. I thought it was going to carry on for a little bit longer than this, to be honest. But it'd be interesting, and I hope we do get a decision tomorrow, just to see. I mean, I think the reaction will be interesting, whichever way it goes. The vibe that I'm picking up on from some of these forums and things like that, that I'm going on just to look at what people think of the trial so far, they generally seem to think that Zenimax will get some kind of payment from Oculus, but obviously it won't be the $2 billion, or I think they're asking for $4 billion now. I think they've upped it to $4 billion. So I don't think it's going to be anywhere close to that, but I think that maybe they will get some kind of payment for damages from Oculus, maybe a few million, but it's difficult to say. And also, I haven't really got any clue the ramifications of what's going to happen on either side of the decision. If it whichever way it goes, I don't really have enough experience in this kind of area to know the ramifications of what will happen. But it will be interesting over the next few weeks, whichever decision we get. I think it will be an interesting to just observe what's going on and how it will affect the industry and how it will affect Oculus and Facebook. And I mean, I don't really think it will affect Zenimax too much at this point, but it could affect them in the future. So, yeah, it would just be cool to see what's going on with this based on the decision.
Hey, Steve, I'm going to kick it over to you now, and I want to present two questions for you that you might be able to comment on in relation to this, because like Gary, you know, I've been watching this from the sidelines, and you'll see a thread pop up about this story, and then you hear everybody comes into the thread and they have their different reactions. And the thing that I've been surprised by is, like, I will go to NeoGAF, which is not they're not like a VR centric thing, you know, it's just a ton of gamers. Some of them are into VR, but for the most part they're not that into VR. And they had a thread about how the Zenimax Oculus thing is going to possibly come to a close this week and we'll have a decision. And two things jumped out to me that people were talking about in here. And I think it's mostly just people that aren't up to speed with the whole thing. But the first one is that some gamers think that if Oculus loses this, they're quitting VR, that it's over, they're done. They're just going to quit VR and, oh, that was fun. No more Oculus. They're done. Okay, so there's that one. And then the other one is, I've also seen a lot of people comment that, oh, this is all on Carmack. They're going to fire him. They will fire him immediately. He's going to be the scapegoat. Carmack is going to literally cost them $4 billion, or, you know, whatever happens, and they're going to fire Carmack right away. Like, Carmack is done in this industry. He will not have a job. I've heard these two things. So let's kick it over to Steve. Steve, have you seen this, and what is your take on all of that?
Yeah, I poke around on NeoGAF from time to time as well, and honestly, I think GAF is a little bit biased against Oculus because of that whole Palmer Lucky thing. You know, for all the political reasons and the stuff he supposedly did, and you know, we don't need to get into that. But I think, you know, no matter what, they're gonna want to see Palmer Lucky go down. Take that for what it is. But and on the first thing, no, I don't think Oculus is going to back out of VR if they lose this suit. I don't think so, even if they have to pay the whole $4 billion, because they got to pay that money regardless. And if it's an investment, it's an investment. So it doesn't change anything. Like if it can make you money, and you have to pay, say, $4 billion or $2 billion or whatever it is that they may end up paying, if at all, then the investment still stands on its own. They don't necessarily need to be lumped together. And in terms of Carmack, he may get the axe. I could see that happening. Not so much because, hey, he cost the company the loss, because you know what, that falls on them and their vetting. You know, and that's the responsibility of more than just Carmack. But I could see him being put to pasture, so to speak, because if he can't use that work, or, you know, then it's going to be difficult to say that he can do anything in the future. How, you know, if they create, you know, some amazing Oculus Rift 2, how do they know that that also wasn't with Zenimax technology? Like, so like they're going to be skeptical of anything he develops. So I could see it happen. I don't know. You know, I'm not in the courtroom. I don't know all the details. You know, the previous times we've talked about this on the show, I have been kind of in the feeling that Zenimax is almost in the realm of kind of patent trolling a little bit. I know it's not a patent, it's up for question here, but looking for a way to just suck money out of Oculus's success. But I must say, in the last week, that when and I'm going to paraphrase one of the defense's arguments, was basically, well, Zenimax wasn't using the technology, so we thought it was okay. Like that kind of paraphrased thing. And to me, that's like, whoa, like that's guilt. Like, hey, that guy wasn't using his bike, so I stole it. Like, no, like that to me was an admission of guilt. And I think that looks really bad on them. So, you know, I've kind of flipped in this last week after hearing that stance. And I think they're going to get slapped. I still don't think they're going to go the full $4 billion, but I think they're going to get slapped for something for sure.
All right. Yeah. My take on it is just going back to the NeoGAF thing and people talking about Oculus quitting or Facebook getting out of VR altogether. That is pretty ludicrous to think, but it's just funny that people would have that kind of reaction and actually think that's even a possibility. The one downside I can see with this is if Oculus does lose, I do believe it's bad for just the mojo of the VR industry in general, just because if Oculus loses this anywhere from, say, 1 billion and up, I would say that it kind of puts a stain on their investment in this. There's already a question. A lot of people wonder, you know, the 2 billion thing, why did Oculus invest in this? And I mentioned this in the last episode. And the point I was actually really trying to make is not why is Facebook into VR. I mean, I know why Facebook is into VR, because if VR is the next computing platform, they want to be there. And the social media aspect of it is incredible, because you can visit with people together. You can all be like, yeah, let's all talk while we're in the Grand Canyon or whatever. Let's all get together by the Statue of Liberty and talk, and we can look up at the Statue of Liberty in VR or whatever. I understand why Facebook is into VR. My question from the hardware company side of it was this the best use of their $2 billion to get into VR, buying an actual buying a company that's trying to make a headset? They could still invest heavily into VR without actually being a company making a headset. That was kind of my argument. But then at the same time, it's like, well, how are they going to build a platform if they don't have a platform to put that on? You know, so I understand that. But I don't think they're going to quit if they lose. But I do believe it could be a bit of a buyer's remorse, kind of a bad stain. And then And then what happens at that point is the margin of error for Oculus going forward from their shareholders, the margin of error gets a lot slimmer and slimmer, and it becomes one of those situations where the shareholders are like, are we really doing a good thing here by continuing to just sink money into this? And so I'm hoping that Oculus wins this, just purely selfish reasons for VR to not have some bad mojo that's kind of bubbling underneath the surface. And then the Carmack thing, I actually thought it was ridiculous that people would think he would get fired, because he is such a key component for the future of that company in VR. He's a brilliant programmer, and but Steve, that point that you brought up about future ideas he can have, and just the danger of something happening there, that is something I didn't even think about. So that's definitely interesting. We'll have to.
It's kind of like the Patriots winning the Super Bowl, right? If they do win it, you're like, well, yeah, they probably cheated. It's like you got a mark on you. You are stained from now in perpetuity.
I would hope as well at that point, if they sort of came out with some kind of settlement with John Carmack, that they'd put something in writing to say, okay, you've done this part. Anything else? Is there anything else you want to bring up now? Because we're going to be using some more stuff that he's writing, and we want to get all this out of the way. There's got to be something in place where they can say, we can now, from this point on, we can use anything that he's writing, and you can't come back on us at a later date. But I don't know how the law works, so.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, it's going to be interesting if we really do have a decision. This will probably be a big story on our next show. We almost should have maybe waited one day and gotten the verdict. I don't know if it's actually coming tomorrow. I believe it can come tomorrow, but it might be like Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that. Okay, so another big story. Now, this is more on the positive side of the coin. We have in Japan, I don't know if you guys saw this, but well, first of all, when it comes to PlayStation VR, it is very hard to get a PlayStation VR. Still to this day, we are in very late January, and you cannot just drive to your local Target or Walmart or Toys R Us or whatever it is and just pick up a PSVR. It's not that simple. And all around the world, it's this type of situation as well. You cannot get your hands on these things, although supposedly shipments are going to be coming in pretty soon. But did you guys see the pictures of the Japanese gamers, long lines of Japanese gamers lined up to get this shipment of PSVR that was coming in? You had people camping out overnight. I saw a ton of pictures on Kotaku of all these gamers lined up. Let's kick it over to Steve. Steve, did you check out all these gamers lined up for PSVR? What do you think this bodes for the future of PSVR in the Asian territories?
Yeah, I saw the pictures. I don't remember reading anything on it. It was pretty self-explanatory. PSVR shipments are in, and people are lining up for them. So I think it's good, and I think it speaks to just the the supply problems that Sony has had. I mean, I firmly believe that they wanted more of these things in the wild and just couldn't get it there for whatever reasons. Maybe they missed forecasts when they opened up pre-orders last spring, early summer, whenever that was. And, for whatever reasons, they didn't have enough out there. And I think they wish they did. So I think it's great that more people want it. And I hope that continues. But you are starting to see, in conjunction with Japan there, you are starting to see a lot of posts on Reddit and whatnot in the PSVR sub, is that they're seeing some in stock. It's not widely available, I don't think yet, but you now have some sort of a chance if you walk into a Best Buy or a Target or whatever of grabbing one now. It's still hard, but it's unlike 6 weeks ago where it was virtually impossible. So stock seems to definitely be improving, and I'm also starting to see, somewhat semi-unrelated, but on my Facebook feed, I'm starting to see PlayStation VR advertisements. Now, it's an advertisement that I already saw before. It was for Batman. The guy kind of sinks through his floor and falls through the Batcave, once he sinks through on the other end. So hopefully Sony, one of their critiques is they haven't been advertising it a lot. And I'm hoping that with with the stock hopefully coming back up, that they say, okay, now we need to advertise it, because maybe they look at it as wasted advertisement. If you couldn't, what good does a commercial have if you convince someone, hey, I want to go buy that, and they can't. So it's kind of like one of those revolving doors in a hotel or something, where like once you get the wheel going, then come the advertisement, then comes more sales, then comes more software, and I really hope that starts happening.
Gary, what about you? Did you see some of these pictures, and what are your thoughts on the popularity of what appears to be popularity of PSVR in Japan?
Yeah, it seems that there is a lot of demand for PSVR all over the world, really. I mean, not just in Japan, but over here in the UK, I don't see many places that have a lot of stock of these. And there seems to be, I mean, pretty much everywhere is out of stock of PlayStation VRs. And you see all these threads on forums where people are they're putting on whenever new stock appears so people can get PSVR. But the generally, I mean, with PSVR over the last week or two, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there seems to be like this thing, this sort of people talking as if Sony is sort of backing away from PlayStation VR a little bit. Now, this seems to be coming from the fact that they're not pushing it as much, and I personally think this is just because they're having problems fulfilling stock around the world, so they can't really. There's no point, as Steve said, there's no point in really advertising it to any great deal if they've not got the stock to back up these advertisements. No point in spending money on these kind of adverts if they can't provide the stock at the moment. And I think that will be rectified in the next few weeks. But so you get this whole tone of people saying, are they backing away? Are they giving up on VR? It's way too soon to have that opinion, but people seem to have been burned in the past from Sony with the PlayStation decisions, like the Move controllers is I guess the most famous example of this kind of thing, where they and the Vita, people say that the Vita wasn't given the support that it really deserved, and all these kinds of things. So I'm just hearing a lot of this lately, and I'm hoping it will just blow over. And as soon as Sony can get the stock of the PlayStation VR back in the retail stores, this will all blow over. Sony will start pushing it a lot more, and we'll start to see a lot more software coming out as well. But don't get me wrong, I think that it's had a very good launch lineup with the PlayStation VR, but it's just that it's difficult with the launch of this kind of thing. Everybody seems to just want more and more. They want more content, which is a perfectly natural thing to want from something like this. You can blow through some of these experiences in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So it's understandable that you do want more content, but I just hope all these little teething problems will just blow over the next month or two, really.
Yeah, I mean, when you see those lines of people lined up, well, you brought up the topic of people talking about Sony. Is Sony going to back away from VR? And I think a lot of that is we have so many YouTubers, we have so many video game outlets that they need controversial subjects to kind of generate this excitement of like, oh my God, there's something really bad going on here. Like it's just like your local news will talk about, is your home going to get robbed tonight? Tune in at 10. You're trying to create some type of controversy thing, and it generates a lot of clicks and stuff. So I think a lot of that is there. But the thing is, these YouTubers and these websites, they had to, for them to get the idea of talking about, is Sony backing away from VR, there had to be something there for them to cling on to even have that idea. And what it is really, in my opinion, is Sony really has dropped the ball in a major, major way. Now, I don't know what the true issue is. I'm guessing it has to be some type of manufacturing issue, or a particular part that is used in the creation of PSVR, and they just can't get enough of them right now, and they just misanticipated how big the demand would be. But whatever the case is, you cannot deny the fact that Sony left sales on the table. How many thousands of people would have bought PSVR this Christmas if they only could have bought PSVR this Christmas? And I remember back in like December and stuff when people were complaining about all of this, I was like, it's not that big of a deal. You know, early January, a ton of shipments are going to come. This is a temporary problem. But here we are. It's late January, January 29th. We still have this issue. I mean, the fact that you see lines of people lining up just tells you that people cannot get this thing. And I really wish, I mean, I wonder what alternative universe would it be like if Sony just had unlimited stock and could have sold as many as they wanted to, and maybe they would be able to have an announcement. Sony sells 1.5 million PSVRs in 2016. We don't have a news story like that because they didn't have them to sell. And I really, it's a little bit of a bad mojo that's kind of floating out there behind PSVR. It's like, Sony, dude, you could have really taken advantage of the situation. You could have really stuck it to HTC and to Oculus and really gotten a huge lead over everybody. And they kind of dropped the ball, but, you know, we'll have to see.
We did have that report from this sort of research company, Superdata. They had some reports saying, initially they were saying that PlayStation VR would sell 2.5 million units in 2016. Then they had to revise those, and the reason they gave for revising those figures to 750,000 was because stock issues. It was purely to do with stock issues. And so, I mean, we can only go on what they're saying, and we don't know the actual facts we got surrounding all of this. But it does make you wonder, like you say, Anthony, if they didn't have any problems with stock at all, how many could they have sold? Maybe it could be as high as 2.5 million. Who knows?
Yeah. But let's see here. So our next news story is, okay, so Facebook, going back to Facebook. Now, we know through this trial, Brendan Arib, as we know, was basically the head guy for Oculus VR. When they first purchased him, I think he was like the top guy basically in the organization that would report then to Mark Zuckerberg. And he kind of got demoted, and he kind of got kicked off the top of the heap there, and now he's in charge of basically Oculus, their PC side of the coin. So he kind of got shuffled over there a little bit, and they made way for a new executive, and this new executive is Hugo Barra. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but Hugo Barra, he worked for Google for a number of years, building up the whole Android ecosystem, and then he left to work for a Chinese company. I'm not sure how you pronounce the name of that Chinese company, Xiaomi or something like that. And now he's coming back to Silicon Valley. He's returning back to Silicon Valley. Mark Zuckerberg reached out to him and said, "Hey, we'd like to bring you here and make you the head of our entire VR effort here at Facebook." And so he's been named like the vice president of Facebook VR, and he basically reports directly to Zuckerberg. Let's go to Gary. Gary, do you believe that part of this is what happened with Brendan Arib during this trial? Because there have been, I don't know if you saw this, but I heard something about some email that Brendan Arib sent to Zuckerberg saying, we've got to be careful. Emails are permanent, or some, like there was some kind of thing that came out like that. And Zenimax was like, hey, what's this email? We got to be careful. Emails are permanent. What are you trying to hide here? And so I wonder if part of that was, damn, Brendan Arib, you kind of screwed this up. You know, here's 2 lashings, and now you're going to be the head of the PC division, and you're not going to be the main guy here at Oculus. We're going to bring this guy, Hugo Barra. What do you think? Have you heard about this, first of all, Gary, and what do you think about this whole situation?
I've heard of it, yeah. I don't know this guy, Hugo Barra, at all. This is the first I've ever heard of him. But with regards to Brendan Arib, it's possible. I don't think we'll ever know really the truth of what's going on there at the moment. It's difficult. And some of the articles that I've been reading about this have been sort of saying how Oculus is more or less being absorbed within. This is another move to absorb Oculus more within Facebook. And just the title of this guy's job, Hugo Barra, is been called. His title is the head of Facebook VR, which it's not Oculus, it's specifically Facebook VR, which encompasses Oculus, the whole gamut of what Oculus is doing within Facebook as well. So it could be a way of, I don't know, it's difficult to know exactly what's going on, but it could be a way of just absorbing everything. And people have been talking about how eventually maybe they'll be getting rid of the Oculus name entirely and just calling it Facebook VR. Maybe the first step will be something along the lines of they'll have Facebook VR launching and then powered by Oculus, that's similar to what we see on the Gear VR type thing, and then they'll move away from Oculus entirely once they've position people in suitable areas where they can no longer interfere, got rid of all the original people that were there, or something like this. I mean, like I say, I don't think we'll ever know exactly what's going to happen, but and I just wonder as well how far this will all go with Facebook VR, and if they'll take a step back, and if Oculus will all. It's difficult because I've got no experience of working in something like this kind of. Where big corporations are overtaking other corporations and absorbing them, buying them out and moving people around. All of this seems to play a big part in this, and people are reading certain things into this, whereas personally I probably wouldn't have read this kind of outcome from this story, but just reading all these articles and where they've gone with it, it does make you think how Oculus could slowly be just become part of Facebook and nothing more. It won't be its own entity anymore.
Yeah, Steve, what about you? Did you check this out? And what are your feelings on the musical chairs that's kind of going on in the VR industry at the executive level?
Yeah, I saw it, but I don't know what it means really. This happens with companies, and I don't know what their roadmap was. Sitting there at Zuckerberg's level, and Arib and whomever, I'm sure they have a roadmap. They have a vision of what they want to accomplish this year, what they want to accomplish within 3 years, within 5 years, within 10 years. And, I'm not convinced that Oculus as a brand was always meant to be, and you're starting to see traces of that. Like I think Gary said, powered by Oculus, or maybe it was you. Facebook is a more popular brand. And, Oculus may have been a step to get the tech. This was a tech acquisition and a brand, itself. And it's a way to transition without putting Facebook's brand on the guillotine, so to say, if this thing was to crash and burn. So, they could get some success and, kind of transition it. This is a Facebook VR content, powered by Oculus. I'm drawing a blank right now, but there's things out there that are like that. You'll start a movie, or certainly with games, say powered by something, and really it's a way to play the brand game, and that's all acquisitions are just, you're buying a brand, a valuation. It's not that specific brand is making that much money, it's that it could someday. And so I don't read too much into it. We don't know their plans outside of what they're currently doing. And yeah, they're shaking it up at the executive level. Maybe Arib was, slapped on the hand and demoted. Maybe he, at the executive level, you're held accountable. Even if you don't make the mistake yourself, you're responsible for the show. So yeah, I think it's probably standard par for the course when something bad happens with a major company. They got to show the stockholders and show the public that punishment was doled out and the ship has been righted, so to speak.
I remember back to when Facebook first bought Oculus. And when Facebook first bought Oculus, there was this outcry from all the hardcore Oculus fans that were really supporting Oculus, and they really wanted Oculus to be a big deal, and the Kickstarter and all that. And then it was like, oh my God, this giant evil corporation buys Oculus. Now we can't root for him anymore. And then I remember when like Zuckerberg was talking about it and stuff, and he's like, no, we're gonna let them be their own company. They're gonna be under our umbrella, but they're gonna be their own company. We're not gonna put Facebook logos over everything. We're gonna let Oculus be Oculus. Now, of course, that was in a different time and a different era when everybody was rah Oculus and hating Facebook. And one thing that's interesting is if they do lose this court trial, and if there is this stain kind of on the Oculus name, and if there is a little bit of this bad mojo, I could see Facebook possibly pivoting away from that Oculus name and just Facebook VR, you know, bam. And I do remember one time there was some type of thing in some mall somewhere that Facebook set up where they had a ton of Facebook employees and they were showing off the Oculus Rift, and they had t-shirts and it said like Oculus Rift or something like that, but then it said a Facebook company, and like you could see it in the mall kiosk and there's pictures of it. And I remember when it first came out, the thing that was most striking about it is there looked like there were 30 employees walking all around with like Facebook shirts and only like 3 or 4 customers that were inside there. But yeah, they could possibly be pivoting to Facebook VR and away from Oculus, even though so many people kind of look at Facebook as almost being this evil conglomerate, but maybe that's kind of dissipated a little bit. And we don't have as much rah-rah enthusiasm for the Kickstarter version of Oculus. All right, so
just talking quickly, Anthony, on this as well, just talking about the musical chairs within the VR industry at the moment. There was this other news story just quickly last week about the HTC, the head of design of the Vive. He, I think his name is Claude Zellweger. He actually moved over to Daydream with Google as well. So that's something else. Everybody seems to be moving around lately. Just the last couple of weeks, it seems to be like everybody seems to get different job roles within the VR industry. I guess the thing to take away from that is a lot of them are still staying within the VR industry. So it's not like they're just moving out of it or jumping ship or anything like that. So it's still relatively good news, I suppose.
Yeah, there has been quite a bit of musical chairs going on, and we do have executives bouncing from company to company, but like you said, it's good they're staying in VR in one way or another. Okay, let's see. Okay, one little story. This isn't like anything huge or anything, but the HTC Vive Tracker. We talked about how this tracker that's coming out is going to be a big deal for HTC Vive owners, especially going forward. And what we did here, we heard a couple of minor little news clips about this. One is it passed FCC regulations. Now, I don't think anybody expected it to fail, but it's good news to hear that it passed, and that will kind of speed it along its way to actually getting into the retail channel. And then the other little bit of news is that HTC is actually going to send 1,000 of these trackers out to various developers around the world so that they can integrate the use of this tracker into their games and into their peripherals and stuff like that. I'll kick it over to Steve. Steve, did you notice any of these little blurbs? And is there anything of any real importance here, or is this just standard type stuff?
I think it's pretty standard type stuff. You know, I'm actually surprised that they've shown it at CES and didn't already have FCC approval. Typically, at least from what I've noticed, you know, a company like Apple, you know, they'll get these devices submitted to the FCC relatively quick, and a lot of times you can get you can hear about a product before it's announced because, you know, you got people trolling the patent submissions and FCC submissions and things like that. So, yeah, I think they're probably a little late submitting it. Honestly, it's really about the only thing I have to say about this. You know, I mean, it's good that it's submitted. Did it say it was approved or just submitted? So, okay, approved then.
Approved, I believe.
Yeah, so that's good. So one hurdle down. Probably wasn't ever going to be a big hurdle, but at least, you know, that's out of the way. So one step closer to us getting them.
Gary, do you think the fact that HTC has given away 1,000 of these things, does it say anything to what the price might be for end consumers when these, the fact that they're giving so many of these out, does it maybe lead us to believe that this thing is going to be like $70 or $80 rather than maybe more expensive?
It's possible, yeah. I mean, 1,000 is a lot to send out to people, and the developers, with regards to this, it'll be exciting over the next few months to see the kind of things that these developers will be able to do with these trackers as well, because there's so much out there that we probably things we've not even thought about that these trackers are going to make things much better within VR. Like I say, we just haven't got any clue what they're going to come up with. But with regards to price, I guess the rumor is sort of $100 around that sort of price, but who knows if they are sending this many out. And the fact that $100 is still quite a lot of money to spend if you need to get a couple of these things. When you add that amount onto the fact that you've already paid $800 for a Vive, and then you've got all these other things, you've got the deluxe head strap and all these extra bits that we've talked about in the past, to get trackers which could add to games, and not necessarily essential for games, but I add certain things to games. I think they need to keep the price down for these things as much as possible. You look at the cost of the controllers themselves. I think they're over here, they're about 130, 140 pounds. No, sorry, 120 pounds over here. So that's with the controller itself. That's got a lot more functionality than just tracker. So I would imagine something around, say, £80, which would work out to around $100. So I think around that ballpark would make sense. And this figure, if they're sending 1,000 out to developers, I mean, people do this with development kits. Like some people you can request development kits for free for various things. This is not the first time we've seen this. So you can request. I don't know if the which VR headset it was actually that was sending some out. You could request a development kit for free, but obviously you had to prove that you were a developer and you're working on something substantial for this platform. So it's not the first time we've seen this, but it could speak to them being not particularly expensive. But I wouldn't like to say for sure.
You know, thinking about those trackers again, I don't remember from when they were first announced if it was revealed. Do we know like the quarter that it's going to actually be available to consumers? Like, is it coming second quarter 2017, third quarter 2017? Have they said anything specific about that?
Not as far as I know. No, I've not heard anything yet. I keep checking back on the accessories website of HTC actually every couple of days just to see if there's been any updates on there, but it just keeps saying coming soon. So as far as I know, we've not heard anything substantial about that.
Because you would think that they would have to have some type of plan where, okay, this tracker is going to come out August 2017 and it's going to be available for $79.99. And that's just one part of the equation, because what they also have to do is they have to make sure that they have a couple of games that are coming in August that are going to take major advantage of this, and then hope that they can also piggyback and have all these companies that already have games that maybe could add support. And then, you know, it's almost like PS4 Pro, where you have all these games that already exist, but they're like, oh yeah, we're going to patch that for PS4 Pro. And so we might have some VR companies that are like, oh yeah, we're going to patch in tracker support to raw data, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. But I hope they have somewhat of a plan. But I mean, obviously they're getting 1,000 of these things out there. So they do want to have an ecosystem, because the tracker doesn't really mean anything if we don't have a lot of developers supporting it in the games. And then also, of course, the peripheral makers as well. Okay, let's see here. So another story we have is that Sony released some statistics of all their digital downloads that sold in the year of 2016, and they had it broken down by PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PSVR, and number one on the PSVR list is Job Simulator. Job Simulator was the single best-selling PSVR digital download. Now, I don't know if this is just for the United States or if this is worldwide, but either way, Alchemy Labs, you got to have to imagine that these guys are smiling all the way to the bank on this, because they've done extremely well. I think they announced not too long ago that this game has grossed over $3 million, making it one of the most successful VR games that we have so far. And I'll kick it over to Steve. Steve, why do you think Job Simulator is so popular among PSVR owners?
You know, maybe it's anecdotally, but I think it's popular because of stuff like YouTubers. You know, in the neighborhood, it's gotten out that I have VR, and you know, my kids are younger, and you know, they don't really get Job Simulator. They don't get the humor because they've never had a job. But the older kids, some of the early teenagers, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, what have you, they come over and they're like, I want to play Job Simulator. And I'm like, hold on, how do you even know about Job Simulator? You've never played VR at all, and you're coming in here and you're specifically asking for Job Simulator. Oh, I've seen it on YouTube. I watch people play it on YouTube. What, really? So that came as a surprise to me. So anecdotally, I'm going to say that's the answer, because for whatever reasons, it became a trend of all the VR titles. It became trendy for a lot of the teenagers. So it's my answer. Could be wrong.
Gary, what about you? Do you have an idea why you might think Job Simulator? Because it's sold better than Batman. The next two games were, I believe, Batman Arkham VR, I think, was #2 in sales, and Rush of Blood was #3. Why would Job Simulator sell better than both of those?
I think it comes back to what Steve was just saying, really. It's the amount of coverage it's had from people on YouTube and just in general, really, because this is a title that even before the HTC Vive and Oculus Rift were released, this was one that was being shown in all these sizzle reels of VR. People playing Job Simulator was in almost every sizzle reel you can imagine before we actually got hold of these VR devices. So I think it's just the amount of coverage it's had. It's a great game as well. You know, it's got the humor part of it as well, and it's great for kids. Kids do enjoy it because everything you see within Job Simulator you can pick up and interact with. You can do something with it, and this is part of the attraction of VR. It's a very good game to give as a demo, because there is so much interaction with it. It's very basic interaction. There's not a lot of substance, but it's very easy to get into and very good to demo. But as well, with this 3 million figure, we were hearing last week about how Arizona Sunshine grossed $1.4 million in its first month of release, which is, it's accelerating. Everything seems to be accelerating because these are all milestones that are getting hit now. Job Simulator's been out for a long time, so 3 million, that was probably a few months ago that they hit that, or a month ago maybe when this news story hit. But the fact now that we're getting titles like Arizona Sunshine that are hitting $1.4 million from their first month, everything does seem to be accelerating. So it's all good news. And with regards to specifically what you were saying about how Job Simulator is more popular than Batman VR and Rush of Blood, these are titles that are big titles, and a lot of people that own PlayStation VR do own them. But I'll just go back to my original point. They didn't have the amount of coverage that we've been seeing for probably about a year from Job Simulator. So I think that's where it comes down to primarily.
Yeah, I didn't really actually think about that angle. I was thinking from a completely different tangent. It has had a crazy amount of coverage. I mean, didn't PewDiePie play it a long time ago? And it's been on like Conan O'Brien and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They've done some Job Simulator stuff there as well. But you know what I thought it was, and this is obviously not the reason. What you guys are talking about is actually the real reason. I thought maybe it was because you have two Move controllers and you're standing up and you're touching so many objects and interacting with so many objects, and because the game is basically built around you and there's all these things for you to do that's around you. I thought maybe that it's like this showpiece for VR, you know, because when people think about VR, they think, oh yeah, you're in a world and you're touching things and you're doing things. And a lot of some of the PSVR stuff that we got is a little bit more basic. Maybe you're sitting down, you're not standing up, or you're using a DualShock 4 and you're not using the Move controllers, and it's not quite as VR as everybody wants it to be, like where you're really in there. And so I thought that was the reason. But yeah, no, it's absolutely the amount of coverage that I got. I didn't really think about that angle. Okay, so let's see here. I got one more story to get into. Okay, so the vice president, or a vice president at HTC Vive, he mentioned this in an interview somewhere, that talking about new headsets and how quickly new headsets are going to arrive, how quickly they're going to iterate on it. And basically what he said was that new headsets will be slower to come than new phones, but faster than game consoles. And he mentioned that game consoles are kind of like on a 5 to 6 year cycle. And then new phones come out basically every single year. You have a brand new phone. So he believes it's going to be faster than new consoles, but not quite as fast as phones, kind of like a 1 to 3 year cycle. Not anything really new here. Steve, anything to say off of that, or is this kind of like common knowledge basically?
I think that makes sense, but I don't think it has to carry true for, you know, a long time. So, you know, I'll kind of go back to an anecdote, you know, and just speak for myself personally. But when smartphones started kind of coming and hitting wide market appeal, I think I bought an iPhone 3G, and then the next year I bought an iPhone 4, and then the next year I bought an iPhone 4S, and then I stopped. And then I kind of went on this 2-year cycle. And what I think happened there was during those early revs, there was a lot of, I guess, low-hanging fruit for Apple to fix or address or to, you know, optimize, make better. And I think that's where VR is. I would buy a headset this year probably if they had enough radical changes. There's so much things that could be better. They could have better screens, better screen door, better lens technology, integrated audio, wireless, so many things. And, you know, if they can knock some of these things off, you know, early on in VR, you know, maybe I could buy one every year or every other year. But then as you kind of hit a mathematical asymptote, so to speak, where, you know, there isn't so much opportunity of things to address. You know, the resolution's good. You can't really, we can get a little better, but it's, you know, it's only marginal improvements. And, you know, our wireless, it works well. You know, maybe we can get an extra couple feet out of its range. And at that point is when I would think is when I would slow down and go, I don't need that update. I can wait a year or 2 or 3. So that's kind of where I'm at. I look at it as more of a curve. You know, there's so many things they can address and make better now. And that will motivate me to buy units much sooner. So I think what he says makes sense. You know, I think they also have to be careful from the marketing standpoint, not to make people feel like, oh, I just bought this thing and now there's already a new one. You know, although I personally would prefer it, I think that would send the wrong message because people are looking at it more like a console platform than they are looking at it as a smartphone. Which is kind of bizarre. I don't know how the smartphone industry was able to pull that off. Like, you know, maybe because they had such good improvements year to year. So that's where I stand. So,
Gary, any quick comment on it?
No, it's a good point that Steve makes, actually. I didn't think about that because I think it's absolutely right. At the moment, I was the same. You know, you get these new mobile phones. When the iPhone was first released, I did the same thing. I'd be updating it, but the improvements were quite big at that point. Now, year on year, there's not a great deal of improvement. So I've got no real incentive to upgrade my phone, really.
But it's waterproof. It's waterproof. Yeah. You can drive in the rain.
Well, that's true. Maybe I will. But no, I think this is a good point. And the fact that there are so many things that could be improved. And also, just going back to what this guy was saying, this Vive president, every 1 to 3 years, a new headset could be coming out. I'm certain we've heard this exact same thing from somebody at Oculus as well. So it seems like they're on the same page as far as this goes. And I wouldn't be surprised. 2018, I would say we'll see a new Vive headset, a new Oculus headset coming out. But yeah, I mean, who knows? We'll see.
Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up for our news stories, but I'm going to kick it over to Steve. Steve, was there any little last minute news stories that we didn't get into?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the Resident Evil 7, not to talk about the game, we're getting that later, but so when you first turn the game on, it asks you if you want to opt in some data collection to, I think they call it residentevil.net or something like that. But anyways, you can go to their website and see all sorts of data on the game, see how many people, you know, collectively, how much distance have the players walked, you know, so many times around the earth or whatever. But one of the things that are really interesting here is they have it clocked at about 10% of all users have played this in VR. And I think that's a very important piece of data. And by all accounts, we seem to believe that that includes all PC, Xbox, and PS4 owners playing the game. 10% of that total collective number have played it in VR, which obviously means a higher portion of the PS4 community, because that's the only place you can play it in VR. I think that's incredibly exciting, and I hope that serves as a way for Capcom to put the rest of the developing community on notice. Say, here you go. If you've been wondering what you can do if you make your AAA game available in VR, well, you know, here's something maybe you can expect. 10%, and if that motivates people to buy the game, let's say, we're just making something up, but let's say if Call of Duty found a way to do it, and let's say Battlefield didn't, that could be a very strong selling advantage. 10%, but 10% more sales, that can fund the VR development. It's not like you have to redo the audio assets. It's not like you have to redo the artist's creation, to quote unquote port it. So I think it's good for the industry. I think it's good for the game. It's a great game, and I can only imagine it would be more if going back to the supply issues. What if it wasn't choked? Could it be 15%? Could it be 20%?
Yeah, the attach rate for that game among PSVR owners must be really high, because we only have like 800, 900,000 of these things out there, and that many people are playing specifically Resident Evil 7 in VR. And also, from the horror standpoint, when you create a horror game in VR, I think if like you have 100% of the population out there, there's probably 30% that are going to be like, nah, I'm not doing horror in VR. I'm just not going to do it. And so for it to be that popular, considering it's in the horror genre, is really impressive. But I don't know that any other horror game. Resident Evil is such a special case because people just love Resident Evil. It has such a great history. And then there's kind of like this viral sensation that kind of goes on with it. It's like, can you handle Resident Evil in VR? How many little YouTube videos have we seen with people going, and they have the little thumbnails of them screaming and all that. Yeah. It's like, I got my mom to play RE7.
So last I checked on that, last that I saw, there were 700 and something thousand total users. Now, we're assuming this is only people that have opted in the beginning when you first turn on the game. So of that 700 and something total users, and about 70,000 of them were playing in VR or had played in VR. So we know 70. And how many didn't opt in? I personally didn't opt in. I didn't realize what it was. I want to go back and look for a way to opt in, because I'd rather them have my statistic, my one. So 70 out of roughly 700,000, and that's 10% of the PSVR community, and we know it's something higher than that due to the opt-in element.
Yeah, 10% on its own is a fantastic number. But when you consider that the fact that this can only be played in VR using PlayStation VR, and yet you've got all these other platforms that are using it as well, and the fact that we've got these problems of people not being able to get hold of PlayStation VR, as you say, Steve, this is, when you look at it from that point of view, you take a step back and you think this could be much higher than that. If they hadn't just limited it to PlayStation VR, I know they've done that, and that's fine. But if you take this all into account from a developer's point of view, it's encouraging. It's absolutely encouraging for VR, because they could be getting potentially 20% if you didn't have all these other artificial limitations on where these figures are coming from. Like if you had it on VR on all platforms, you didn't have any stock issues, and all these other things. It's a big figure. It's surprising. When I went onto this website and had a look at it, it was surprising to me. And like I say, the way it's worded on that website, it's coming across as if this is all the platforms put together, 10% are playing on PlayStation VR. It's big. It's big.
What I wonder is, do you think, because people will talk about exclusivity for this, and I don't know that Sony actually gave money to Capcom and said, you know what, this is only going to work on PSVR, because we're going to give you this 500 or million or whatever it is that we want this to only work on VR. I wonder if it's actually a situation where Capcom, because here's the thing, if Capcom were to make RE7 work for all Vive owners and for all Oculus owners as well, you have to, as a company that provides a game like that, you have to consider the support, okay? Because you're going to have HTC Vive owners calling up your support number and saying, my computer, it restarted, I can't get PSVR to, you know, same thing with Oculus. So to make a game work for the HTC Vive and for the Oculus as well, it's not just simply flip a switch and everything's great. You have to consider the support from the customers that are going to be playing it on those platforms and if they have problems. And Capcom might have said, you know what, let's just kind of concentrate on PSVR for the VR part of this, and we'll maybe think about going somewhere else later. And then also just the sheer number of how many people have PSVR headsets compared to the others. Do you think, Gary or Steve, either one of you, do you think Sony actually really gave them like a bag full of money to like lock in this exclusivity, or is it almost like exclusivity more from an accidental, just, well, we're just going to focus in on PSVR for now?
I do think they received something from Sony. I don't know if that can be absolutely confirmed or not. But I do think they received something from Sony, and it may not have been, you know, hey Capcom, we see you're making Resident Evil in VR. Here, let's make it exclusive. It may have come before that. Sony could have put feelers out there for a lot of games in development, say, hey, we'll give you some money, we'll subsidize you if you make your game VR compatible. And it sounds like I'm saying the same thing, but there is a distinction there. And I think that's probably more likely, you know, and Capcom said, well, hey, here's a bag of cash. You know, we were kind of maybe thinking about making it in VR anyway. This can help tilt the scales. Let's do it. And with that, yeah, when you take a bag of cash, you know, there's got to be a you know, a payback period, so to speak. So, you know, it makes sense why Sony would want it to be exclusive. So I think it's possible that happened. But either way, I do think they were subsidized to some degree. But I also do think, and we can dig into it deeper, but the way the game plays out, I think they intended it very early on to be a VR game. There's just so many cues to that I feel.
Gary, any quick blurbs?
No, I'll just nothing really to add to what Steve said. Really, I was just going to say, I mean, we could, if you guys are ready to get into sort of what we've been playing, we could go straight into Resident Evil if you want to talk about that, Steve.
Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I'm very happy to talk about it. So, 2 episodes ago, episode 18, we did our games that we're looking forward the most in 2017. And surprisingly, this week, 2 of my games came out. One of them was a complete surprise. So my #1 title was Resident Evil 7, and I'm absolutely adoring it. And the other one was Knockout League, and no one knew that it was coming out. So it also came out as well. So I had to spend some time with that. But I'll go ahead and hop into Resident Evil 7 first. You know, it is a game that I think we should probably talk about multiple times. And I know, Anthony, you haven't had a chance to play it. So let's certainly revisit it, maybe do like a spoiler cast with it or something, because I'm going to do my best to keep this spoiler free. The game is just quite simply fantastic. I can't think of a VR game that has made me feel this sense of presence in terms of ambiance and environment. Capcom has done such a good job, like just detailing the game, everything from the dirty dishes stacked up in the sink to the way the pictures look on the wall. It feels so alive, you know. And we kind of said that about Robinson the Journey. It was all the little details, the sounds, just the details. And you know, from a technical perspective, you know, if you want to go into it and you want to say, oh well, I see a jaggy there, or that texture looks a little too simple, yeah, all that's there. I mean, they have what they have to work with. And for the record, I am playing on a PS4 Pro. But the game just looks fantastic. Like, you know, like setting that aside, you know, if you just sit there and just look at the art, what they created, it just feels really good. the game itself, you know, like when we talked about, when we previewed it a couple episodes ago, you know, I had made a comment that I said I didn't think it was very combat focused. And I think compared to the later Resident Evils, it's not. But there is more weaponry than I was expecting. And I had intentionally stayed pretty dark about on the game. So and it uses a head aiming mechanic, which I think feels good, right? Because that was one of your concerns, Anthony. You're like, you know, the game feels good except until I got the gun, and when I got the gun, you know, is when it felt clunky. For me, it felt okay, and I think it's probably because I've played a lot of rigs, and in rigs I chose the head aiming mechanic. So compared to all the old Resident Evils, I feel I actually aim better because I can get headshots when I want to get headshots. I'm in total control, and maybe almost like how a PC gamer feels when using a mouse keyboard. So, you know, all that, you know, it's hard. I really don't know where to begin talking about it, but like, it's just, the game feels really good. The problem that I think a lot of people have, and I've made it a point to kind of go into all the threads on Reddit, like under Vive, where, you know, someone will make a post under the Vive subreddit and they'll say, man, RE7 looks awesome. I wish we had it. You get a lot of instant kind of blowback. And I think some people are just almost jealous that they can't play it on their Vive. They'll say, well, it doesn't have motion control, so I would never play that game. It's not a real VR game. And one guy had said this to me, you know, I'd made the comment and I said, you know what? I think this game was intended for VR. A lot of the set pieces, so to speak, really just seemed like it was set up for VR. And he's like, no, it doesn't have motion controls. And I think that's a problem. I personally don't think it needs motion controls. I would prefer it have it, but you know, I tried to vision myself playing it with Vive controllers, and I don't know how I could, because locomotion is a problem. I could probably vision myself playing it with Oculus Touch controllers due to the actual joystick, but you have to walk around. You have to, and doing it with the trackpad, some of the maneuvers I've had to make, I feel like it would just result in me getting killed. And it also goes back to Sony. Why in the hell did they not make the nunchuck compatible? Like, I could play this with a nunchuck, you know, where you actually have the OPS move nunchuck, where you actually have the thumbstick. So setting that aside, you know, the game is just awesome, and I really look forward to Anthony playing it, so we can actually really, you know, kind of go back and forth and talk about it in greater detail. But you know, I think
hey, Steve,
go ahead.
Quick question. Compared to the demo, like the 1 hour opening level demo or whatever, do you feel like the full version that you're into, is there a lot of difference there, or is it almost a situation where, well, if you've played the opening hour demo, you kind of know what this game is going to be, or it's like, no, you don't really know what this game is going to be. It's quite a bit different when you get to the full game.
It is different. Like, so you get in the opening hour demo, you get a feel for it, and that is relatively, it's not in the very opening hour, and that whole sequence is different. You go in different places, you find items in different places, but that portion of the house is there. And yes, that feeling that you get playing the opening hour is there. What you don't get in that demo is you don't get a sense of connection with the characters that you meet in the game. You know, when we've said this so many times, I know I've said it, and I think I said it on my Let's Play for the game. When one of these characters, one of these residents, these hillbilly crazy people are in front of you, and they're trying to knife you or whatever, like, it just feels like, you know, go back to how you felt playing Batman standing in front of the Penguin or whatever. It's like, now this person's trying to attack you, and it's creepy as hell, and you're in this dank house. Like, the feeling is like, is meant for VR. Like, I don't see how. There are some people that were like, well, I played it in VR, but then I wanted to go back and play it in, you know, on a monitor because of, you know, better resolution. I'm like, yeah, but you feel like you're playing it through a window. Like, it's just, I can't fathom why anybody would play it in VR other than being scared, which I think that's a whole, you know, other kind of silly thing. But other than being
wait. Let's talk about the scared thing real quick, because I know you've played A Chair in the Room and you've played Rush of Blood, and those are probably the two biggest horror experiences in VR that we've seen so far. How does this fit in with that? Because there are a lot of people out there that, you are really good about being able to go into horror and it doesn't bother you. But there's other people, man, they're kind of nervous about it. They don't know what to expect. What would you say on the horror aspect?
I think it's mostly sensationalism and hyperbole, really. Like, yeah, it is tense, but it's different. It's like in a chair in the room, it was psychological. You kind of scared yourself. There was nothing there to scare you. There was nothing in front of you. There were a few jump scares. I'm not saying there was nothing there, but it was your mind playing tricks on you. I call it like the sort of the Blair Witch type horror. If you've seen that movie or the new one. I haven't seen the new one. But then there's the more in your face, like, I don't know, like one of the Saw movies or the, Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, it's not as scary because it relies on just jump scares and the gruesome to just kind of be there in full light. Like, you see the scary thing, you see the saw blade or Freddy Krueger's hands or whatever. That's more Resident Evil 7 falls more into that camp than it does the psychological. Now, it has scared me a few times, but it's never been like, oh, I got to take this off, or I'm ripping my PSVR off my head and breaking it in the process. Like, it's never been anything like that. It's been like, I'll turn a corner and be like, and then that's it. And I'm like, oh, that was cool. Like, like afterwards, I'm like, hey, they got me. Good job. And that's like, it's YouTubers being sensationalists. And, one of the cool things, and I wish I would have bought it. They, Capcom or one of their partners, they had this, what they called a 4D candle. And if I had known about it, I would have bought it. But apparently this candle, you light it when you're playing the game in VR and it has an aroma. I guess maybe it smells like stank mildew or something. About what you would expect this house to smell like, and I'd imagine that would actually be pretty cool if it worked well enough. So,
man, my mom has a house that smells like that. Yeah, she's in an apartment, but she still has her old house. She's kind of like a hoarder a little bit, and you go into that old house, and it's like, oh man, I need a hazmat suit to go in here.
Yeah, this house feels like that. Like, it feels really vile. You're walking around, and you're like, oh, there's people that live that way. And if we were talking about TV shows earlier, if either of you guys have seen the HBO series True Detective, but if you have, in that first season at the end, and Resident Evil 7 takes place in a place called Dulve, Louisiana, and I think the end of True Detective, I think its settings is somewhere around there in Louisiana, maybe East Texas. And you go into this house in the end of that show and you meet some despicable characters. I won't spoil True Detective for anybody. And Resident Evil 7 feels like you feel in that last 2 episodes of that series. And it is disgusting. And Capcom has done a fantastic job. Last week we talked about, well, Vertigo didn't sink its hooks into me. This game has. Like, I can't wait to go play it more. Like, when I went to work, I was like looking crap up at work when I shouldn't have been, like, because I want to play more Resident Evil. I think it's been the best thing that I've done in VR. A lot of people will have issues with it because it doesn't have motion controls and because there's some jaggies, but you know what? It's got a metric shit ton worth of developer time and polish into it. And it shows. It is one of the best experiences you can have in VR.
Just going back quickly, Steve, because this is one of the concerns that I had about this game, about the lack of sort of boom scale motion controls. And like I said, I'm not really against these kinds of games because I enjoyed The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, playing through that on a gamepad. That's okay. I'd rather it was boom scale and it had motion controls, but I could play it perfectly fine. It's not really a big deal. But I just wonder, because you're coming at it from a similar place where I would be coming at it from. You're a Vive owner and you've played all of these room scale games with motion controls. You know how cool it can be. Did it really detract anything from the experience of Resident Evil, or did you not take that? Did you not notice anything about that?
No, for me it doesn't, because I've kind of accepted that I got to let these developers do what they need to do to make the content right. Like, some games would have to absolutely utilize room scale and motion controllers, like Racket NX or Audio Shield. Like, they flat out suck if you're trying to do it with a gamepad. But locomotion is a problem, and I'm concerned for the industry that we're going to have room scale / motion control snobs that feel like everything has to be done that way. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's going to be good for the industry. Like, and I think I used this example in a discussion once, said, I can't dunk a basketball in real life. Does that mean I can't play a basketball game in virtual reality? I mean, do I have to literally jump 10 feet in the air? And if we're going to have expansive experiences, at some point we have to have artificial locomotion, no matter how you slice it. That has to happen. And when that happens, it can kind of break down room scale to a degree, like and that's why we've had it in this first year of the Vive. It's been a lot of teleport experiences, a lot of you get this immersion breaking element one way or the other. Or you have a game where you stand in a room, like chair in a room was perfect. Like for that game, room scale was fantastic. You're bending down, picking things up off the ground. The room that you're in is mapped to your real room scale space. It was perfect. Resident Evil 7 isn't that. It can't be that. I don't know how it would work perfectly with motion controllers as
Hey, sorry to interrupt real quick. I just wanted to mention one thing in regards to, because you said, I forget what you said, but you were saying, well, it has to be a dual shock because of the locomotion problem. And I've heard this said before by other people when it comes to PlayStation VR. And you also mentioned, why doesn't the Navigator controller work? And what I don't understand, I apologize, I have somebody just turned on their like lawnmower next door. So if you got background noise, it's all my fault. But what I don't understand is, why can't I just take the Move controller and just aim it in a direction, press maybe the circle button or whatever button they want you to press, and it's like, oh, you want to move over there? Take your Move controller, aim over there, and hit the circle button. Where's the locomotion problem? I don't get it. I mean, I know you're supposed to face the camera, and so if you start turning around and going like this and going like that, you're going to get into a problem eventually. But I think the idea of it being impossible to have locomotion with the Move controllers is like, maybe I'm completely off base here, but it's like, come on, some dev needs to.
The issue is accuracy. So Loading Human is a game for PSVR, and it does that. You point it where you want to go, and you press the actual move button, that big kind of oblong button in the middle of the controller. You do that, and you can walk that way, but it's a little bit unnatural. And I guess you could learn it, but I'd have to say there's a reason why Crytek didn't implement that on Robinson the Journey. There's a reason why Capcom didn't do that on Resident Evil. It just doesn't feel right. And it may be the ambidextrous nature of it. Okay, so if you're trying to use your left hand to carry a pistol, and then you mentally you have to disassociate your left hand from that mechanic with now your locomotion mechanic. And I think some of that gets into it. It's not as straightforward, but it is doable because Loading Human did it. I didn't like it in Loading Human, and I like the Onward style, that sort of similar thing on the Vive. I do like that kind of locomotion just fine. Why didn't I like it in Loading Human? I don't know. Maybe because I don't think that's a particularly great game itself either. So take that for what it is, but. My speculation is that it has to deal with, if you had one hand dedicated to nothing but locomotion, I think that would be better. But then that's also sort of equally immersion breaking, right? Like you can't use that hand to carry your pistol or throw grenades if it's also how you locomote. You're on mute.
A lot of the Vive games that we play, you'll have a gun in one hand or a knife in the other hand or whatever, but you're still holding it out, and then you're like hitting the gun or whatever is still in your hand, but you're hitting the trackpad and you're going that way. And yeah, it does have the trackpad, which adds that extra little bit of, okay, I'm pushing on the trackpad, now I'm going. But I don't know. It's just
yeah, neither are great. Like if I have my way, and if I could sit down with Capcom and like I'm an executive for Sony and say, you will do this, I would say get the I called it a nunchuck, but I guess that's the Wii controller. Get the Navigator.
Yeah,
Navigator. That's my fault. Sorry, Nintendo. You get the Navigator controller working, you know. And Farpoint, I am almost certain that the gun that you can buy with that game, or that you'll get with that game, it has a thumbstick on it. It's built onto the controller. I want to feel about 90% sure of that. Watch me be wrong, just because that's life. But that's what I think would be ideal, is a motion control in one hand, motion control in the other hand, but with a thumbstick. I think that would be no pointing it in the direction you want. None of that. Like, you know, a thumbstick so that you can mentally separate your locomotion from what you're doing with that hand.
I've got to say, before I even heard of the HTC Vive and room scale and all this kind of stuff, really, when I was first thinking about playing VR a couple of years ago, I was thinking it'd be with a gamepad, and it'd be exactly how you play through Resident Evil. It would be in this format, and you'd be able to look around, but you'd still be playing with a gamepad. But you know, it doesn't take a huge leap for me to put myself back in that position and imagine playing this game like that. I just wondered more of the fact that now we've been a little bit spoiled with room scale and motion controllers, if it's easy to make that transition back to playing Resident Evil 7 with the gamepad. And from what you're saying, I mean, it sounds like it's pretty straightforward. It's not a big problem.
Yeah. So my entire time with VR, you know, I was playing Lucky's Tale and Chronos, and, you know, then got a PSVR, and there's tons of DualShock gamepad games. So this whole time I've been bouncing back between gamepad and, you know, motion controls and room scale. And like, I have no issues. Neither bothers me. I'm more interested in is it making me forget? Like, is it making me go somewhere else? And Resident Evil achieves that. And again, I'm very concerned. You know, maybe I shouldn't be concerned. You know, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm a little apprehensive about a community that feels like it has to be one way or the other. We used to get that a little bit with the Oculus versus Vive guys. You know, the Oculus people were like, well, after I work a long day, I don't want to stand up and play games. I want to kick back on the sofa or whatever. They don't say that as much now because they have touch. And, you know, but you still see that kind of dichotomy with PSVR when a game like Resident Evil 7 is brought up. And I don't think it's fair. Like, I think we just got to let the game do what the game needs to do. Like, there's so many other constraints. There's money, there's time, there's budgets. Like, there's so many constraints. We can't give it another one. You know, let motion controllers and room scale be where it needs to be. And, you know, when it doesn't, that's okay too. It's still virtual reality. If I had gotten into an auto accident, and I apologize for anybody if I offend them, but if I had somehow lost the use of my arms, are you telling me that virtual reality isn't virtual reality for me because I can't, you know, waggle my arms around? And I don't think that's fair. Like, you know, I think it is virtual reality when you can look around, when you have a sense of depth, and when something can get in your face and then get out of your face and you can dodge something. I think that's virtual reality, whether or not you are using motion controllers.
Hey, Gary, it works absolutely great, but all you have to do is stand up.
Yeah.
You just stand up, you hold your controller, and you'll be in that world.
So I played, if you've seen my 2 Resident Evil Let's Plays, I did one of them standing and I did one of them sitting. And for me, it doesn't, like, I don't feel, standing was fine. Like, it doesn't feel bad. I'm not against it. But sitting also felt okay. Like, it was 6 1/2 dozen the other, you know. I do find that, interestingly though, that when I'm sitting, I prefer the smooth turning, which is the one that doesn't do the angled pie chart stuff. But when I was standing, I did prefer the pie chart.
When I was playing through The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, I'll say it again, because this is really the only game I've played that's similar to this with the gamepad, first-person game, playing through with the gamepad. I actually tried it in a couple of ways. You know, I was sitting down, but I've got a swivel chair, so I was sitting down, but I was still turning in the chair as if I was standing up. So I wasn't really using the rotation, the right stick, to rotate my point of view or anything like that. And then I tried it standing as well, and that worked great as well. I did very briefly try it sitting down, just fixed forward and using the rotational, and that was okay. It worked okay as well for me. I know that some people, that's probably the point where it will cause motion sickness if you're using the right stick. You've not mentioned it, Steve, so I assume that Resident Evil hasn't had any of that kind of an effect on you at all.
So it does, or it did. I had it a little bit when I played the beginning hour demo, but then, you know, it worked away. So here's how I did it with RE7, you know, because I didn't play the demo for a month or so leading into RE7. And what I did was I started off standing and I did 30-degree angled clicks. And then I upped it to 45. And then I turned the smooth turning on when I went back to it the second time, and I was seated and I was fine. And I think if you're having issues with this game, you have to try it a myriad of ways. And what I found is that now, and it's very similar to Rigs, the Rigs has a very long, like a 45-minute kind of tutorial portion where they go through all kinds of settings with you and helps you choose. And by the time you're done with that, like, you're comfortable and you're ready to go. And I think you kind of have to do it yourself with most other games, Resident Evil 7 included. And one other tip I'll get, and I did not realize this until like 4 or so hours into the game, is there's a setting for there's a field of view setting or something like that. And basically what the game does is it'll darken the edges, and these edges will start getting a red tint as you take damage and you start getting low on health. You can turn that off, and it'll still get red as you take damage, but the darkening will go away, and it brightens the game up. Not in a, you know, like makes it poppy and bright and like outdoors in the sun kind of bright, but it just brightens it up, and I think it's far more enjoyable. But again, I didn't do this until I was, you know, several hours into the game. I think if you come out of the gate with that, and if you're susceptible to motion sickness, it could be a problem. But definitely check it out. And I wasn't even aware of it because once you kind of set all the settings in the beginning of the game and then you start playing it, and if you don't revisit settings and try things, you know, you may not ever notice it. And I didn't. And then someone on Reddit said, hey, do this. And I think it's a tip worth mentioning, because I like it a lot better with this field of view thing turned off.
All righty. Well, that's a lot of Resident Evil talk, and we'll definitely have more of that because I have not touched it. And I will definitely be playing it this week. So I will be talking about it next week. One thing I think all three of us may have played, I'm not 100% positive that Steve has played it, but there is a demo on the HTC Vive store called Dimension Hunter, right?
Yeah.
That's right. And Gary, you did a Let's Play of this, and why don't you go ahead and kick it off and tell us a little bit about this demo?
It's a cool little game, actually. The main thing that will attract you to this game is because I saw an article on Upload VR where it went through this, and they were talking about how it's got this sort of stylized graphics, their sort of comic book graphics, and you see the screenshots, and it really does draw you in. The graphics look great. So I thought I'll download this demo. The game's coming out, the full game is coming out at some point. I don't know if we've got a date on that yet. But the game is a shooter, and it's on rails, so you're moving automatically through these various levels. They're futuristic type levels, but with this comic book sort of aesthetic, it's got to this game. It's just a cool little gimmick, I suppose. It's not really a gimmick, but it's just a cool thing. And the graphics are not, I mean, they're not fantastic, but because they're stylized in this way, it makes everything seem so much better and so much more cohesive within this game. And when you shoot these the enemies, you've got all these captions that pop up like boom and all these things when you're shooting them. The game itself is pretty straightforward. It's a shooter. As I say, you're on rails, so you're moving automatically through these various futuristic type levels. You're being attacked by enemies, which are generally sort of these robots or drone type things, similar to what you see in some of the drone enemies are similar to the space pirate trainer type enemies in that. And you're just going through and shooting them, and it seems pretty straightforward, really. There's within the demo itself, there doesn't seem to be a great deal to it. You've got some variations in the weapons that you can use. You've got some different guns. Well, the gun that you hold actually transforms, so it can do very similar to Space Pirate Train. I suppose you can do different shots with this gun. It works very well. It's very basic. I don't want to. I mean, the problem I've got with it at the moment is just the fact that it might be a little bit too basic. There doesn't seem to be a great deal to it from the demo. It does what it does very well, and I enjoyed playing through the demo, although I didn't play all the way through. It's quite a tough game. I found it tough anyway. So all I am hoping is that the full game maybe introduces some extra mechanics or some kind of extra depth, maybe, although from the demo, I don't think it will. That's really all I could say.
You know what's interesting is I tried this demo as well, and I tried it completely separate, not knowing that you were going to do like a let's play of it or anything like that. I just happened to see somebody announce something about it, and I've been playing some Vive recently, and so I was like, oh yeah, let me download this demo, because I used to have a lot of fun. There would be so many little demos that would come out, and I loved being able to download all these different little demos and kind of get a little taste of this, a little taste of that. And this has been, I mean, I'm not going to say it's the greatest game out there at all, but it's finally a good demo that is actually worth the effort of downloading it and all of that. But when I first played this, I played it a couple of times and I was like, oh, it's kind of cool, but I don't like the feel of it. And I basically dismissed it. I only played it like twice and didn't really, I played it for like 15 minutes. I'm like, it's all right. And then what happened was Gary did this Let's Play. I had no idea he was going to do one. And the Let's Play popped up, and I ended up watching your entire Let's Play. And you were so positive about the game. You were saying, oh, this is good. I really like this. I really like that. And I was like, man, I need to try this game again, because maybe I didn't get a good feel for it, you know? And so I tried it again, and it is really good. It's actually pretty fun. Like you said, it's very simplistic. But what I found is that as you're going through the level, you know, you have your two guns and it's automatically moving, and the robots come, and you basically, they have this red dot on their chest, and so you kind of see the red dot, you start shooting at them, but you can shoot their heads and get headshots. And the graphical aesthetic, it reminds me of, I think there was a game back on the Nintendo Wii called Mad World, which was like all black and white. I think it was made by Platinum Games or whatever became Platinum Games later. And it was like black and white, very stylized, kind of Sin City almost, where everything is black, white, and gray, but then you have splashes of red that come in. And it kind of had a similar graphic effect like that with that comic book style. And I was like, yeah, this is a really cool style. And then as you're going through the game and you're shooting these guys, you start going along, and then all of a sudden, boom, the beat drops. And I noticed that when I was playing it, I was like, I'm dancing along and I'm shooting these robots and I'm dancing along. So I have to do a Let's Play of this that's going to be really goofy, because I'm going to be dancing in different sections. And I actually thought while I was playing it, I was like, man, you know what would be cool is like you're shooting and stuff, but in between the little shooting sections, if like little bubbles popped up and you had to like smack them to the beat, and then it would be another shooting section. So almost like mixing a rhythm action game with on the rail shooter. And I was like, oh yeah, but anyway, I was having fun dance around with it. Let's kick it over to Steve. Steve, did you get a chance to try this, and were you dancing?
I was not dancing. You know, I was seated and playing it with a gamepad. No,
you're doing it wrong, man.
We had a commenter actually comment on one of my Let's Plays. It goes, I'm surprised you played this standing, Steve. It was Knockout League. I'm like, well, kind of had to. No, Dimension Hunter, whatever. It was really good. And my first thought playing that, and I always hearken back to games that I've liked over the years and do this inherent comparison, but it immediately made me think of Borderlands. And I'm like, man, I've never thought about Borderlands in VR. This proves that would work. That would be awesome. The game as a whole, I love the art style, and it's like Gary said, it's like a comic book type art style. And I'd take it a step further. It's like a comic book art style meshed up with Sin City, because they'll just choose some red coloring and just pull that out and do some selective coloring there. And I think it looks great. And you know, yeah, it is on rails, and was concerned when I first started playing and it just started moving. I was worried, oh no, I'm going to start getting you know, motion sickness, because that typically happens when you're not locomoting in any way, whether it be with a thumbstick or whatever. That can be a bad recipe, but I didn't feel any of it during this game. So yeah, I think it's cool. I'll want to check out the full title. The one thing I wish that would be different though, and maybe I just need to get good, is when the robots and the drones would shoot at me, I felt like some of the bullets were almost hard to dodge. Like they kind of came too direct, or something. Like it just, like, I feel like I had to make like sweeping movements to get out of the way of those bullets. And maybe that's what they intend. Maybe that's more fun because you're bouncing around more. But other than that, it felt a little wrong, like maybe a little bit out of tune, so to speak. But other than that, I thought it was a really cool experience. And
I agree that part with the just dodging the bullets, they seem to they're a little bit too direct and they're too quick to dodge out the way of. Maybe.
Yeah, and it made me wonder, like, do I have some sort of like shield or something that I can whip out? But I didn't see a way. And again, I only ran through it twice, but.
I'm just going to say this game is, I think it's going to be one of those accidental exercise games. This is a game where you are going to move a little bit, at least for me, when I was doing my play through it, and you're shooting at those robot guys, and they do shoot like a red laser ball, and it comes right at your head, and it's really fast, and you have to just, like, boom, you have to quickly dodge from one side to another. And I was doing that in my play space, and I was kind of getting a little, like, huffing and puffing a little bit, because it can, and then also dancing around to the music as well at the same time, like in between the little sections. But it does seem like it's kind of one of those accidental exercise games. And this game is coming to PSVR as well, so PSVR users will be able to get to play it. One thing I like about on the art style front is, and you mentioned Borderlands as well, is, what do they call that art style again? Cell shading, right? Cell shading, where if you go with a cell shaded type of look, it lowers the requirements of your computer's power quite a bit to like generate that, compared to like going with photorealism. And that's a great way to like maintain a 90 frame per second to each eye and make it nice and smooth. And Steve was talking about the locomotion, where he thought, man, automatic movement, this is a recipe for disaster. But you know what? I didn't feel anything bad about it. And you know how I kind of felt is, have you guys ever been to one of those airports where they have like the automated tram type of thing, where you can just, you step onto a thing and then it's moving automatically, you know? And I kind of felt like that. I kind of felt like I'm inside this thing, and then when it starts moving, it's like, oh, okay, I'm on the tram now and it's moving now. And I didn't feel any kind of nausea. It's just when they open the door, you have to remember, okay, I got to step over into the door. Otherwise, anytime I'm in a VR experience and you like automatically move through a wall or something, that doesn't feel right. But other than that, everything was okay.
Yeah, I didn't have any motion sickness either. I had zero, none. But my first thought is, yeah, I've played enough VR. I know that typically that's a problem. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, uh-oh, here we go, motion sickness, and it never happened. So they must have done something right. And maybe, like you said, maybe it's the lowered requirements graphically, and you know, maybe it's not going into reprojection or anything for me, and you know, the refresh rate is staying very nice and keeping me from feeling that, because you know, all that stuff kind of comes together.
Yeah. So we're running kind of long here. I actually was going to talk about Vertigo. I recently bought Vertigo, but we're running kind of long. I don't want to try to like quickly talk about Vertigo, so maybe I'll save that for next time, and then that way I'll be able to get a little bit farther into Vertigo. Gary, I don't know how we're doing here with the time. Do you want to kind of wrap it up, or did you want to get into anything else?
Well, we can, if you just want to quickly spend a few minutes on Dear Angelica, because I know that you and I have played that. I don't know if Steve's played that as well.
No,
but yeah, well, Dear Angelica, it's one that it's on the Oculus store. It's a free download. It's by Oculus Story Studios, and it's just a narrative experience, I guess. It's something that when you first go into it, I was sort of enjoying this just this experience as it was, and it's done with this in this way that it's almost like a tilt brush drawing. That's my first thought, and then when you get to the end of this experience, you find out that this has been created entirely using Quill from the Oculus, for the Oculus Rift. So it sort of made sense, and I thought that this was really, really well done. This little story, I can't really go into too much about it. It's just a very short story, so you know, I recommend people download this and give it a try. It's got the voice of Gina Davis, who I've not heard of for quite some time, but yeah, she does a really good job of providing some voiceover in this little narrative experience as well. But what about you, Anthony? Did you what did you think about this?
You know what? I had technical problems with this one. Like because basically, if I'm going to fire up a Revive thing, anything that's in Revive, I'll have my Steam menu, and then you have those buttons at the bottom of your Steam menu, and one of the buttons says Revive. And so, you know, I aim my Vive controller at that, I click on that, and then that opens up kind of all your Revive stuff. And then you kind of scroll up or scroll down and you select whatever it is. And so the Dear Angelica thing is right there. I selected it. And then what would happen is, I would start hearing the music for the experience and in my headphones, but I was still in my Steam VR, you know, thing. It never actually kicked in and never started up. And then so I took my headset off and I looked over at my computer, and there's like a little error message, something about failed entitlement, blah, blah, blah. And I did a search on it and I couldn't find anything for that. And then I thought, okay, well, let me try. What if I manually go into the folder and actually take the little Dear Angelica like execution thing and actually drag it onto Revive, kind of like you had to do it back in the very beginning of Revive. And so I did that, and it worked. I put my headset on, and it's showing all this stuff, no sound, no audio whatsoever. So I could see everything, but I couldn't hear anything. And so I was like, oh man. And I tried this a bunch of different times. I did some different searches, and I just never could get it to work, but it looked really cool. It visually, I imagine, with the sound, and like there's one part where like a car is driving along. Do you hear like the sound of like a car driving and stuff? I'm sure there's like,
yeah, there's a lot of sound effects as well as the voiceover narration, because it's basically I mean, I can't really go into the story. It's basically about a woman remembering mother, and that's really what the story is about. One thing I'll say before I just pass it over to Steve is, with a lot of these stories, these short narrative experiences within VR, a lot of them tend to play on the same emotions. You know, they're tugging at the heartstrings a little bit, and I'm just worried that this is great. This experience is a great experience, but I just get a little bit worried that we're going to get too many of these kinds of things and get a little bit of fatigue from this kind of stuff. But what did you think about it, Steve?
I thought it was pretty good. Like you said, you know, it tugs on the heartstrings. I didn't have any of the issues that Anthony had, and I just checked to see if there were any issues on the Revive issue list, and there weren't. Like I said, it tugs on the heartstrings. It's a girl remembering her mother, kind of in a journalistic, well, not journalistic as a media, but as a journal writer type perspective, and you know, it just gives you all these great visual cues and visual, like, you know, just representations. It's all it's not any like motion. It is motion, but it's like, if you've ever you know, in watched wow, what's our I'm drawing a blank, what's our the game on the Vive where you can tilt brush. If you've ever loaded someone else's art in tilt brush and it kind of draws it out for you, this is how this works. It kind of draws these scenes for you. And it just looks, it's kind of dark background and very vibrant neon type colors. It looks really great. And the story, you know, it's emotional. It's intending to make you feel sad and all that, and that's fine. You know, that's how media sells. You know, you gotta appeal to emotion one way or the other. So it's certainly worth checking out. I recommend everybody do it. Typically these types of things, I always get my wife to check it out because she's very, you know, kind of artsy minded, and you know, she likes this kind of stuff. So I'm not worried about fatigue there. I mean, you know, we have 467 wave shooters. You know, I mean, if there's fatigue, it's elsewhere, honestly. So I think it's great, and you know, check it out. It's free. Why not? You know, if you can get it to work. And Anthony, just you know, as you talk about the issue you had, you're describing the same issue I had with Bullet Train. Like I would hear the audio, but I would get no video. Well, I guess the first time you ran it, you know, I could hear it. I could hear the train, but had nothing. I was just in my Steam environment. So
I've kind of wondered if I need to erase every Revive thing I have and almost like maybe erase every Oculus thing I have and like re-download everything. Like there's some type of conflict or so. I don't know what's going on. Cause like I try to play this game Ripcoil, you know, Ripcoil for the Oculus Rift. I try to play that, and almost every time when I go into the multiplayer and try to play another human, I get this Oculus Network connection failure. Please try again, something like that. And I've Google searched this, and nobody knows what I'm talking about. I went onto the Oculus forums and I said, "Has anybody seen this error message?" And nobody's like, "Nah, I've never seen it. I don't know what you're talking about." And it's just so weird that I get these certain errors repeatedly and nobody else seems to get it. I almost wonder if I downloaded all that Revive stuff so early in the game and then it's been reworked so many times. I know it's supposed to automatically update itself, but I don't know if it's like stacking on top of itself or.
I don't think it automatically. I think it automatically checks for updates. It should tell you if it needs one. I want to say that's how it is. So maybe that's one thing. Make sure you're running the latest because this is a newer release. And if you don't have the latest Revive, then that may be your problem right there.
It's possible. Alrighty, well, we've gone for a pretty long time here with this episode, and so we'll probably go ahead and call this episode 20 of VR Roundtable. I do want to say that on our YouTube channel, we are adding lots of Let's Play videos. We're trying to add a new video every day or so. I've been actually adding a new video myself almost every single day. I'm having a lot of fun recording these videos, and some of them are not the greatest. Some of them work out a little bit better than others. Sometimes the audio might be a little screwed up or whatever, but you know, we're just banging them out. I can say that today I uploaded Robinson the Journey, a playthrough that I did on PlayStation VR of Robinson the Journey. So that's up there to check out. Steve, I know you recently put 2 Resident Evil Let's Plays on there, so that's some stuff that people can check out if they want to see Resident Evil 7, the full game. I actually have not looked at your Let's Plays because I don't want to spoil any. I looked at one for a brief second, and then I saw like some lady in a hallway, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to see this. But I do love the production value that you're putting into your Let's Plays, like the way you got your camera and stuff is really cool. And Gary, you've been popping some Let's Plays as well. Anything for the people to look forward to in the very near future, or one that you've just recently uploaded?
Yeah, well, you can check out we spoke about Dimension Hunter, so you can check out my Let's Play on Dimension Hunter. And I've got one going up at some point of Vanishing Realms, and also just the Gnomes and Goblins preview as well. So they'll be going up at some point.
Yeah, so definitely if you guys can, check out our YouTube channel because we are constantly popping new stuff. Oh, Gary, hey, you just did a mini documentary on the history of virtual reality, and that was a really cool documentary. We want to definitely point that out. A lot of people already know about this, but tell us real quickly, what was your thoughts on doing this? What made you think about doing a little mini documentary on the history of virtual reality?
Yeah, well, it's one that I've been thinking about doing for quite a long time, actually. Quite a few months ago, I just did a quick cursory YouTube search for anything that gives some information on the history of VR. And there's some little videos out there, but there's nothing that really goes into sort of in depth for any length of time. They're sort of short 5-10 minute videos from what I could see. So I thought I'd do one that went right from the very beginning to up to sort of modern day VR. It's about 30 minutes long, this documentary, so people can check it out. It gives an overview, and I try not to focus just on sort of the Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive. Once we get to the latest, the last section of the documentary, you know, people will, there's so much information about the production and development of the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift out there. So that last part is really an overview of the development of those 2 headsets. But before that, I do go through the whole history, you know, the 80s, 90s, and even before then as well. So it went down quite well, and I think it's just sort of shows the amount of interest that there is in VR and just where it came from, really. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, so if you haven't checked that out, definitely check that out. Check out our Let's Plays and keep checking in on our YouTube channel. And as we say every single week, we always like it if you can possibly subscribe to our YouTube channel, of course, and leave a comment or two. That always helps fuel us to do more of this work. We're kind of experimenting with it, and we don't really know if it's any good or not. So any feedback that you guys can give us can help make these better and deliver more of what you guys might be looking for. And we're just having fun with it. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things as well. From the podcast standpoint, if you could, of course, leave a review for the podcast, we absolutely appreciate that. And I don't know, I guess that's pretty much everything. Our email is vrroundtable@gmail.com. If you would like to send us a suggestion, a question, comment, anything like that, you can definitely shoot us off an email. Is there anything else I'm forgetting, guys?
I don't think so.
You got it.
Okay, so that's going to do it for episode 20 of VR Roundtable, and we'll see you guys next week. Take it easy.
Later.
Thanks. Bye.